In the early hours of December 26, 1996, a quiet neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado, became the center of one of the most haunting mysteries in American true crime history. A 6-year-old beauty pageant queen, JonBenét Ramsey, was reported missing from her family's home. Hours later, her lifeless body was found in the basement of the same house. The bizarre ransom note, the strange crime scene behavior, and the endless theories would thrust this case into the national spotlight, where it remains to this day. Tonight, we unravel the case from the beginning. The facts, the contradictions, the suspects, and the questions still unanswered nearly 3 decades later. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was born August 6, 1990, into a wealthy and socially active family. Her mother, Patsy Ramsey, was a former Miss West Virginia, poised, glamorous, and deeply involved in pageantry. Her father, John Ramsey, was a successful businessman, the president of Access Graphics, a company that had recently achieved $1 billion in revenue. From an early age, JonBenét was placed into the world of children's beauty pageants. Her photos and performances captured attention far beyond Boulder. Dazzling costumes, makeup, and big pageant stage smiles gave the media everything they needed to shape a narrative in the aftermath of her death, one that would later be criticized for sensationalism. But inside the family home, JonBenét was described as energetic, playful, and sweet. She loved riding her bike, playing with her older brother Burke, and performing Christmas songs. The Ramsey family Christmas of 1996 should have been a joyful memory. Instead, it became the prelude to one of the darkest mysteries of the decade. December 25, 1996. The Ramseys attended a Christmas party at the home of their friends, the Whites. The evening was festive, music, food, conversation. According to guests, nothing appeared unusual. JonBenét fell asleep on the car ride home. The family returned to the house on 15th Street. Patsy dressed JonBenét in bedclothes and tucked her into bed. At least, that was the story that would later be repeated in interviews and police statements. Just a few hours later, shortly after 5 a.m., Patsy Ramsey would awaken to discover something that would shatter her world and ignite decades of suspicion. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey dialed 911. Her voice shook as she reported her daughter missing. She claimed she had found a 2.5-page ransom note at the bottom of the staircase. To investigators, the note would become one of the strangest pieces of evidence in modern crime history. It was unusually long. It mimicked phrases from action movies like Speed and Dirty Harry. It demanded an oddly specific ransom, $118,000, the exact amount of John Ramsey's holiday bonus. The note claimed JonBenét was kidnapped by a small foreign faction, a phrase so unusual it raised immediate doubts. The note instructed the Ramseys not to call the police. But Patsy called immediately. Adding to the strangeness, the note was written on paper from a notepad inside the Ramsey home. The pen used to write it was also from the house. Handwriting analysis was inconclusive, but many analysts agreed it bore more similarity to Patsy's handwriting than John's. The ransom note remains one of the most hotly debated clues in the case. Boulder police arrived quickly. But their inexperience handling major crime scenes would become a major criticism. Officers allowed friends and neighbors to enter the home, contaminating what would soon become a homicide scene. There was no perimeter, no forensic isolation, no formal search of the entire house. Hours passed with police waiting for a call from a kidnapper that would never come. At one point, officers told John and some of the friends to search the house, from top to bottom. It was John who entered the basement's back room, a windowless, cluttered storage area, and discovered JonBenét's body. She lay on the floor, covered partially by a white blanket. There was a garrote around her neck crafted from cord and the broken handle of a paintbrush from Patsy's art supplies. John lifted the child, carried her upstairs, and placed her on the floor. This moment destroyed the integrity of the crime scene forever. The autopsy concluded that JonBenét died of 2 main causes: strangulation and a skull fracture. The skull fracture was massive, a deep crack nearly 8 inches long. Yet strangely, the external bruising was minimal. There were indications of possible chronic and acute vaginal injuries, though medical experts debate whether abuse occurred or if the injuries were caused during the assault. The garrote showed she had been strangled with force and precision, twisting with the broken paintbrush handle. There were also signs she had been wiped down, though some DNA was found on her underwear, small, degraded samples that would fuel years of debate. The autopsy left one haunting conclusion. JonBenét's death was not accidental. It was a deliberate killing. Within 24 hours, the case exploded across national media. A murdered beauty pageant child, a wealthy family, an odd ransom note, an unsolved mystery. The formula captivated the entire country. Tabloids blamed the parents. Parents blamed the media. Reporters crowded the street outside the Ramsey home. Missteps in the early investigation only deepened the chaos. Leaks to the press were constant. The public began forming strong opinions before evidence had even been analyzed. For many, the case had become a spectacle, not a tragedy. One major theory suggests an unknown intruder entered the home. Supporters point to a broken basement window. Footprints in the snow, though this was disputed. DNA on JonBenét's underwear that didn't match the family. A stun gun-like pattern found on her skin. The size of the basement room, quiet and hidden enough for an attacker. One prominent intruder suspect was Gary Oliva, a local sex offender later convicted for other crimes. His confession letters were inconsistent, but chilling. Another was Bill McReynolds, the town Santa Claus who had a fascination with JonBenét. But no physical evidence linked him to the crime. The intruder theory remains popular, partly because the ransom note seemed designed to imitate a kidnapping. But critics argue an intruder would have needed time, privacy, and deep knowledge of the home to write such a long ransom note inside it. Another major theory points to someone inside the house. Some investigators believe JonBenét may have died accidentally, perhaps during a confrontation with her brother Burke. Others propose an argument escalated or a fall caused the head injury, and that the strangulation and note were staged to cover it up. Points supporting this theory. The ransom note was written using the family's pen and paper. The strangely specific ransom amount. No signs of forced entry. The note's length, extremely unusual for a real kidnapping. John finding the body on his own. Patsy wearing the same clothes from the night before. Burke, who was 9 at the time, behaved strangely in later interviews. But no physical evidence linked him to the assault, and he was never named as a suspect. The Ramseys underwent polygraphs, hired lawyers early, and held their own press conferences, fueling public suspicion. But police handling errors made it impossible to prove any theory conclusively. Many experts argue the ransom note holds the key. The handwriting analysis community remains divided. Some said Patsy could not be excluded. Some said John was excluded. None could conclusively identify the writer. The note's language showed movie references, deliberate misdirection, a strange tone mixing threats with familiarity, a possible attempt to mimic a foreign speaker. Some theories suggest the note was written after JonBenét was already dead, to disguise the crime. Every detail, down to how the word businessman was written, has been contested for decades. DNA found on JonBenét's underwear was considered a major break in the case. But later testing suggested the sample might have been trace contamination from the clothing manufacturing process. This revelation dismantled years of assumptions. The case reopened multiple times, new technologies were applied, new suspects emerged, old suspects resurfaced. But nothing led to charges. The Boulder Police Department and the district attorney's office publicly clashed over who mishandled the case. Every expert, detective, and statistician seemed to have a different conclusion. The truth, buried under decades of confusion, seemed further away than ever. Over the years, the media constructed its own villains and heroes. Talk shows speculated wildly. Tabloids printed conspiracy theories. Entire documentaries leaned heavily toward one suspect or another. Patsy and John Ramsey were publicly vilified for years. Burke Ramsey, then only a child, became a target of unrelenting internet speculation. Books, TV specials, podcasts, and YouTube channels kept the story alive, sometimes with accuracy, sometimes with distortion. The real victim, JonBenét, often became overshadowed by the spectacle created in her name. Nearly 3 decades later, the JonBenét Ramsey case remains officially unsolved. New technology may one day identify unknown DNA. New interviews may reveal new clues. Old evidence may be reinterpreted. John Ramsey still believes an intruder murdered his daughter. Patsy Ramsey died in 2006, never exonerated by police, but cleared indirectly by later DNA statements. Burke Ramsey lives a private life, still shadowed by public suspicion he denies emphatically. As for JonBenét, her story became a cautionary tale about media frenzy, investigative failure, and the human cost of sensationalized crime. Until the day the truth is revealed, her case will remain one of the most mysterious and haunting in American history. Thank you for watching this deep dive documentary into the JonBenét Ramsey case. If you believe the truth will one day surface, share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, every story has more beneath the surface.